Hi, this is Ian for Toilet of Hell Radio, and today I am with Bobby Jarzombek of Fate's Warning and so many other things. Bobby, thank you for talking with us today.
Sure, no problem. Good to be here.
So, you've got your first new studio album in 4 years coming out.
Yeah, we we did the live album live in Europe. In between there, where we went to Europe and did about 11 shows and taped all those shows, and that came out, I guess, maybe a couple of years ago, live in Europe. But this is the first studio record since then.
And I assume you were working on it long before the pandemic or anything like that.
Yeah, we actually started working on it sort of October, or well, Jim worked on it, I think, sometime during the summer. But for me, um, last summer, so it would have been almost a year and a half ago, kind of. But for me, I started working on my drum tracks. I was on the tour with Sebastian last year right at this time, and I got back at I think it was November, early November, and I started working on it kind of mid-November, just kind of getting the tracks together and sorting through all the files that Jim had sent me.
Interesting. So, I mean, for songs as complex as what you all do, I do wonder about how the songwriting process goes. So, Jim is sending you riffs.
Well, he sends me, I mean, um, depending on if the most of the time it's a full song, and sometimes it'll be the guitars. He'll have just sort of a scratch bass guitar, and then I'll have like drum programming, or even if there's a little bit of layered sounds of different sort of guitars, or synth kind of things, whatever it might be. He'll have all that on there, and sometimes it will have Ray's vocal if Ray had been working on it already, and sometimes it won't. It just depends on how far along that particular song is in the process. And so he'll send me those things, and I'll sit there and I'll uh, kind of go through the listening to the drum programming, and listen to all the sections and see what I like and what I don't like about the song, about the programming, and we'll email about it, back and forth, and he'll say, or we'll talk, and he'll say, well, I'm kind of hearing this on this section. Don't necessarily do what I'm hearing here. I just couldn't come up with anything. So feel free to kind of go your own way on that. And I'll take the files. I'll work with them in my studio, play some things. Sometimes I'll work on the whole song and send it back to him and say, hey, what do you think of this? Sometimes I'll just do certain sections, and he'll reply and whatever, and we piece the song together. Sometimes it takes maybe 2 emails back and forth, but if it's a long song, uh, for instance, on a new record, Longest Shadow of the Day, we probably went back and forth about 20 times on that song. Maybe, I don't know, maybe more, but it's a process of going, back and forth with files, and with uh, audio files and emails, and descriptions of things and that sort of thing.
And what are you sending back? Are you sending back actual audio recordings of yourself playing, or do you sketch it out in MIDI or something?
No, I do it in my studio. I'll play, but it's not like a fully. Uh, Sometimes, like, I'll just throw up the microphones are already set up, but sometimes, like, like, I'm not tuning drums, I'm not doing anything. I'll have a different snare on my kit for some reason, for doing something else, and then I'll just play it to that or whatever. And so sometimes when I send him files, it'll be over the course of maybe a week or two, and the drum sounds will change, or whatever it might be. But it's actual recordings of myself playing it. I don't particularly uh, program that. It just takes me too long to program something. It's so much easier for me to sit down behind the kit, play it, and just send it to them. And the performances aren't perfect or anything like that. It's just say, like, hey, is what you're hearing? Does this work? That sort of thing.
This is a pretty new school way of working. I mean, this isn't. I imagine
Really?
this doesn't come natural to if you're used to, jamming out on a song with people playing. How long
Well,
have you been doing this?
well, back in the old days, I mean, before any kind of sort of technology of being able to do that, uh, I mean, if you all live in the same town and you grow up together, and especially if you're young, and you're used to practicing and that sort of thing, the common way of doing it is obviously sitting every 4 or 5 guys sitting in a rehearsal and hashing it out. But I mean, it goes back as far as like even when I was working on Spastic Ink stuff with my brother. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that,
Yeah.
but or even even Riot stuff. When I was working with Mark Reale, I would send he would send me cassettes of the songs, and back then he would just maybe have like a metronome, and he would play, because Mark never did program anything, but he had a metronome and he would play along with it. And I was free to do whatever, I was free to create from scratch, which is okay. I like listening to what a guitar player or whoever the songwriter is. I like to listen to what they're hearing from the drums. If they want the drums to be busy, if they want it to be really low end, if they want it to be, a lot of cymbals, or maybe, or toms, or time, if it's double time, if the snares is always on the downbeat. There's a million variants as you can do with it when you're listening to a riff, as far as a drummer, and how you want to play that part or interpret it or whatever. And never have an idea exactly what the guitar player is looking for until until you hear exactly their programming. And sometimes the programming isn't very good, depending on who the guitar player is. I've worked with guitar players before where their programming, it's nothing like what a drummer would play. I mean, it just sounds
8
like,
hands.
yeah, just like crazy stuff happening at different times. And I'm like, who would play that? Um, but fortunately Jim isn't one of those, and neither is my brother. But and that's I like to do it that way. But my brother did the same thing. He did the programming, and then we would go back and forth. So I mean, I've been doing the thing as far as like a guitar player programming something, I guess, ever since drum machines started to be the thing where guitar players were using them to write with, because that's the way they would write. And I mean, the one good thing about that is over the years, guitar players have kind of figured out what drummers would, or will do, or whatever. Um, and so they've got a better understanding of that. So it's worked out that way.
I definitely want to try to talk about the MIDI groove pack that you worked on, because it sounds
Oh,
like you've got quite a bit that you could say about that. But before we talk about that, I'm curious about how much compartmentalization you have to do when you're going from one music project to another. Like when you're thinking about doing drums for Fate's Warning as opposed to doing drums for Halford, or doing drums for
hmm.
the, you do have a style, but you're not always playing the same style of music. And so how much conscious work do you have to put into shifting gears for all of this?
Uh, not. I mean, obviously, I don't think exactly the same if I'm doing something for Fates as Halford, or Sebastian Bach, or whoever I'm working with. I don't think the same. And I think because I've been playing drums for so many years now, and growing up and playing you know cover music. Even before I was playing like original music, I was playing cover music and playing uh, hard rock, playing progressive rock, heavy metal, and even playing country music, which I do a lot of that in South Texas here. And so, of course, I don't look at it the same, but I don't look at it so different, because all of these musics that I'm playing, and all these styles I've played these styles for over 30 years, 40 years maybe, and so I just it's not like I have to say, oh, I have to put on my progressive hat now. I
Mhm.
approach the music as it is, and when I'm presented the music, I already know kind of, you know where my roots are in that music, with the bands I grew up with, and the certain techniques, if you want to call it that I practiced over the years to make it work within this style. And so I just kind of go with it at that point. And I know how to approach the music. There's a little bit of a different physicality in the different styles. Like Fate's Warning, to me, I kind of say it's more, it's more hands and fingers. It's technique. There's some power in there too, but whereas somebody like Halford or Sebastian, it's power. It's heavier, sort of stuff. So that kind of lends itself to more arms and more physical playing. And even Sebastian sometimes playing like the rock sort of stuff that's more the hard rock. It's a little more sludgier. So it's like I said, I grew up playing all these types of music, and I kind of know when I get the song from somebody, whether it's progressive or hard rock. I just know how to approach it.
It's interesting that you mentioned playing in cover bands for a while initially. I mean, I suppose everybody does that when they begin.
I still do it.
You still do?
Yeah.
What kind of songs are you covering now?
Well, mostly being that I'm in South Texas, when I'm not on the road, and it's some people this sounds bizarre too, maybe, and some people maybe it doesn't, but being in South Texas, I play a lot of country music playing around town.
And I don't think that's shocking at all, to be honest. I play in a metal band, and I play in an old-time folk dance band. I totally get it.
What type of band?
I have a metal band and an old-time folk band, like contra dancing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I remember people always telling me, kid, those metal riffs are just bluegrass in a different key. And I was like, what? No, get out. And then eventually I got it. I was like, it is just bluegrass in a different key.
But I mean, the thing is as a musician, like, you have to make a living playing, of course. And, I can't be on the road with Fate's Warning, all year long, or Sebastian Bach. Or not everybody's working on projects all the time. It's not like where you were in one band. I wish it was, to that, extent where it was people played in one band and you were able to make a living playing in one band, but you can't do that. But down here in Texas, I do a lot of sessions, country music sessions and stuff like that. And I know a lot of the players around town from playing it here for 40 years. So I'm constantly playing, just cover music, and it's mostly country music. Sometimes a little bit of rock stuff here and there, but it's mostly country stuff. George Strait, Alan Jackson, some classic stuff, George Jones, Ray Price, Merle Haggard, that kind of stuff.
That's fantastic.
And not only that, but I also play in a kind of a corporate band. We do big clubs, dance clubs, and I play with 4 members of George Strait's band in that band.
No, you don't. Really?
Yeah. You want to look up the website, texasjamband.com.
texasjamband.com. Yeah, I'm absolutely going to check that out.
4 members of George Strait's band, and then there's 3 other guys in the band, a bass player and me and the fiddle player. And so it's a 7-piece band, and we play. Actually, right now we're not able to play so much, but the next gig we have is New Year's Eve. But I play with them and doing sort of, like I mentioned, bigger clubs and stuff like that. And when they're not on the road with George Strait, that's kind of their little side project.
And is that originals, covers, a mix?
It's a mix. Band has a couple of CDs out, and we do some of the originals, and then we do some George Strait stuff, and then we'll do classic Merle Haggard, stuff that I was mentioning. I can't believe I'm sitting here on a Fate's Warning interview and I'm talking about Texas Jamm Band. Well, it's okay.
It's whatever. All good. Our audience is really omnivorous. You'd be surprised.
Cool. Some people, I have 2 Facebook pages, Like I have a fan, you have Facebook, you have your main page, and then you can only have 5,000 friends. And so a buddy of mine said, well, open up a fan page and you can have as many followers or friends as you want. So I had the friends that were my friends, mainly on the 5,000. And then I opened up the other page and I started it's mostly people from overseas, kids from overseas and
Huh.
stuff like that. If I post something about Fate's Warning on that other page, I'll get like tons and tons of comments, all positive, blah, like great, can't wait to hear the record, blah, blah, blah. If I post anything about country music, they're like, I could just see them all with their hands crossed with a frown on their face. It's just like, I could tell people are pissed off, or they're like, why are you playing country music, or something stupid, or like if I take video of myself like chopping down a tree in my backyard, we want to see more drum videos, we don't want to see you, like it's stupid. It's like these people can't get like beyond like, hard heavy metal and progressive rock. They got like, I guess maybe it's kids or people who are sort of disgruntled from just like, I don't know, who knows what it is, but it's funny because I look at both of my Facebook pages and it's like, I already know, like, like which one's going to turn over, the more comments or the less comments based upon whatever subject I'm mentioning.
It's incredible the kind of feedback you can get about that stuff these days.
It is weird. I mean, it's incredible, but it's also very strange. It's eye-opening. It's a little enlightening, and sometimes it's depressing.
To get back to the topic of cover songs, though,
Uh-huh.
uh, in prepping for this interview, one of the projects of yours that I hadn't heard, other than Texas Jam Band, which I had never heard, but I thought, I should listen to Juggernaut because I was assuming
Oh, well.
it just sounds like Riot, and I don't know, I never checked it out, and whoa, it does not sound like Riot. It
What
does
does it
not sound
sound
like.
like?
To me, it sounds like if early Dark Angel had a really nasty rhythm section.
Really? Huh.
That's how I would describe it. But I was wondering what on earth were you doing that you wound up making that sort of album? It's so unlike the rest of your catalog. It's a totally different
Which
sensibility.
one? Which one is it? Is it Baptism Under Fire or Trouble
That was,
Within? There's two.
I believe, Baptism Under the Fire is the one I was
That's the
listening to.
first one. Yeah, I mean, um, what happened? It's strange because, like when after I got out of high school, like we're going way back now, of course, and people
Sure.
know how old I am based upon when I started recording. Those records came out in like 86, 87. So what happened was I played in a band with my brothers, Ron and Ralph. I have an older brother also that plays. And when we all kind of separated from high school and, people doing different stuff and going off into the college world and all that, uh, I started playing in local bands, playing cover music. And we, and just trying to make some money. I was just right out of high school. My brother Ron, at that point, was still playing, the rock stuff, the heavy stuff, like we were doing, like hard rock. I mean, we were living in that whole early Scorpions, UFO, Rush, uh, all those bands. We were living in kind of that world of music. But music started to get heavier and heavier. I didn't really get into it right away. I stayed in sort of the cover band thing. And then my brothers started playing with S.A. Slayer, which was the version of Slayer from San Antonio when the two Slayers happened at the same time. And he started playing around town. That was 84, 85-ish or whatever. And I was a little bit envious of that because I was starting to get into bands like Accept and Raven and all these kind of heavy, in the new wave of British metal, bands and all that. And I started to really say, man, like I want to do that, I want to, but, and so what happened was there was a local band, friends that we knew from the band Juggernaut. They put the band together and started to play around town a little bit. And they went through a couple of different drummers and did some demos and this and that. And they somehow, because I was still hanging around town and going to shows and seeing this stuff, but not really involved in the music, they asked me if I wanted to join the band that they were working on a record deal, and they were there's a little small label called Ironworks, and that folded. And I said, well, if you guys got some songs, I'll listen to it. And I remember approaching that music, the Juggernaut stuff, and thinking like, I really didn't know what to do with it. I didn't really know what to do on the music. And I remember having a conversation with Scott Womack. I said, should I play heavy on this song, or should it be intricate? Or like, I knew how to play the music, but I didn't know how to approach their particular music. So I remember having some weird discussions with him about it. And I just started going into rehearsals with them, and we started working up the songs, and we started playing shows. And the deal with Metal Blade came through. And it was weird for me because, like I said, there was my friends at that time that I kind of, I don't want to say abandoned, but I kind of did my own thing for a little while, and they stayed doing the music. And so when I came back to it, it was cool that I was able to do that. And right away, Juggernaut had a deal on Metal Blade and put out Baptism Under Fire. And it was kind of strange because all these other bands that were little local bands playing around town trying to get record deals, and then Juggernaut ends up with this record deal, and nobody else. I mean, there were in South Texas, there were a lot of bands. My brother played with S.A. Slayer, then he played with Watchtower. There was Hellstar came out of Houston, but then there was Militia, there was Carrion, there was a whole bunch of these underground sort of South Texas, San Antonio metal bands, and Juggernaut was the one that sort of arose from all of them with a record deal. It's fortunate for me because it sort of turned into a stepping stone to get me to, like all the next places, Riot, then into Halford and all that stuff.
Listeners, if you have not heard Juggernaut yet, it is not quite like anything else you've heard. Please do check it out. I've as soon as I'm done with this, after I listen to some Texas Jamm Band, I'm gonna put on some Juggernaut and really get into it because I was pleasantly surprised. Now let's talk about the more mature side of your career. You have a MIDI groove pack that you put out some years ago, and I've messed around a little bit with groove extraction and Ableton and stuff like that, so I get the general concept, but I've never talked to somebody who is really on the other side of doing something like this. Can you talk about how that developed?
Yeah, I did quite a bit of recording at Sound City, the legendary Sound City in Los Angeles. Um, Halford records, a couple of Halford records were done there, and then the Sebastian Bach record was done there, and I did some other projects with Roy Z there, and but what happened was I don't want to go through way too far around this, but studio manager, her name was Siobhan. She became a friend of mine, and I was always in the studio tracking something with different people, and I also became friends with Joe Barisi, and who's mixed and produced Tools, Queens of the Stone Age, Volbeat, all that, and so I got to be friends with them just from seeing them around the studio. And so the first thing that happened was Siobhan had her husband Rail, who wanted to put together just a MIDI sample pack, and so I had never done a sample session where you have the engineer behind the kit, and you walk in there and you hit drums, you hit a snare drum, pop, 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 and then you get a little quieter, pop, and you do that on a sample session. That's the process, but you start real soft, and then you get really loud, and then you come back down to soft, and you do that for 5 minutes, and then after you do the snare and you do the kick and you do the same thing, then you do the hi-hat. Now this is how, like if any of you guitar players know, work with a sample pack of just sounds, then the hi-hat's like this. You take the tip of the stick and then you play it on the hi-hat, on the top of the hi-hat, like right on the crown of the hi-hat, not on the side of it, but on the crown, and you hit it real soft. You go, and you get a little louder, the hi-hat, and soft to loud. And you do that for 5 minutes. Then you'll lift the hi-hat a quarter open and do that same process. Then you'll lift the hi-hat half open and do that same process. Then 3/4 open, then all the way open. Just the hi-hat alone takes an hour on those sample sort of things.
And can you possibly mess it up? Do you ever have to do a different take even?
No, because they cut, they take each hit and they find the all the good ones or whatever. I mean, that's a crazy, you have to be absolutely nuts to be the guy that pieces these together and you know, makes this into files. I mean, Rayo's incredible at this stuff. And that's the platinum sample, just the samples. But what I did as soon as I got in the studio and I started doing it, it's funny because they had other drummers doing it. And as soon as I got in the studio, I was like, well, how far these notes need to be apart? And they were like, well, I don't know, just hit the drum or hit the cymbal or whatever. And I said, well, give me a click track, at least give me something to play to. So depending on if it was a hi-hat and how far it was open, it, you know, like it takes a while for it to decay. Then I would make, you know, leave more beats, more clicks in between each hit. But they just put the metronome on 100 beats per minute, and depending on if I wanted to, you know, like hit every quarter note, every eighth note, or I mean, not great, every quarter note, every half note, every whole note, every other whole note. That's the way I would sort of space out where I would put each hit. And that's
Oh, wow.
so
I'm
I
sure the
did.
editor loved you for it.
Yeah, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I did the sample pack with them, and we played, and we did that whole process for 7 drum kits. After we did that, Rayo started talking to me, and he said, "Hey, I have a couple of drummers that I'm doing actual uh, groove packs or whatever you want to call them." And I said, and he said, "Would you be interested in doing like a metal one?" I think John Tempesta did one with them, maybe. I'm not sure. But I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And so uh, I was at Sound City. We were doing a Halford record. It was 2010, I think, maybe, or 2009. God, man, maybe it was earlier than that even. And we were doing something at Sound City, and in the B room, they set up an electronic kit, a Yamaha electronic kit, and had it all kind of hooked up. And it was pretty cool because I was already doing a metal session, so I played a lot of the grooves that I was playing. I had just played on the Halford record, and I would just, Rayo would set up a tempo like 140 beats per minute, and I would just play, you know, like I just, and then I start adding a little double bass, and then I would, then I maybe play fills, and then I would do halftime, and then maybe Crash Ride or whatever, and I just play for about 5 minutes, and then I was kind of like, enough of that. And then he was like, and then I say, what do you need? And then he would say, maybe something with more toms, or maybe something with more hi-hat, 16th notes on the hi-hat. We talk about it a little bit. And so I would play a little more at that tempo. And I just played at about probably 8 or 9, 10 different tempos. And then he would say, okay, we need some drum endings. We need big drum endings, or short drum endings and big drum endings. And then we need, like whatever he knew what he needed from me. And I would just play and whatever. So then it was done after, or it was all recorded. Then that was when I was living in Texas. So then I flew back home, and then he would take these pieces And sometimes they were 2-bar loops. Sometimes it was a 4-bar phrase. It just varied or whatever. And he would start to send them to me, and I would look at them and I would say, and sometimes you have a little bleed, maybe if I hit one tom and maybe another tom would trigger at the same time. So I would have to take my little cursor and like bleep out that one tom that wasn't right. It was very tedious, but I didn't do the crazy tediousness stuff that he'd had to do, of course. So he would send me the files when they were close, and he'll say, what do you like about this? Do you like this one? Do you like, and then I would say which beats I liked and which ones I didn't like and that sort of thing. And then he put the whole thing out for guitar players to use. So it was pretty interesting, but it took a long time.
It sounds tedious for you too, but it also sounds like it might be kind of freaky to see yourself reflected back to you at that level of data analysis. Did you learn anything about your playing by getting it thrown back to you as MIDI?
No, not at well. I learned. I know what my tendencies are, just from tracking on my own. Like I know, like if I'm playing a groove, I know where my tendencies are. Like where I have a tendency to put the snare drum. Is it behind the beat? Is it a little in front of the beat? Is the high? Where does the hi-hat line up with the kick? Or the snare? My fills, if I'm playing a quarter note fill, a real spacious fill, what are my tendencies? Are they to rush or to drag? Just looking at wave files, I know all my tendencies, and that's another thing that's weird to me about when I when I do a lot when I'm doing sessions and stuff, and if I'm in the studio and there's like I've worked with producers or whatever, and all these guys have preconceived ideas of drummers or of players, and they'll say something like, man, your best session is going to be your first or your second take, or like whatever. They'll say certain things like that. Like that's an example, and I already know my first run through of a song is my first take is not going to be the best. There's going to be some things about it. Some of the fills are going to be better on the first take because I'm really concentrating on lining them up, and I'm really and for some reason I don't even know exactly why, but some of my fills are good. Like say if I play a song, like Jim sends me a Fates Warning song or whatever, and I worked on the whole song. Okay, now I'm ready to track it. I do a playlist and Pro Tools. I don't know if you know what the playlists are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll do about 7 playlists, and I'll run over the verse. I'll play the verse one time, then right on top I'll play second time, third time, fourth. I'll do the verse 7 times, and then I'll maybe move to the second verse and do that. So I get all the verses knocked out. Then I do the choruses or whatever. But if I have a song, and even if I do it that way, but sometimes I'll have songs where I can kind of get through all the song because it's a little bit simpler or whatever. It's not so progressive. I just know from going through that and listening to playlist 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I know the best takes for me is going to be probably around 3 or 4. It's not going to be 1 because I don't really feel the groove enough. I don't feel immersed in the groove of the song. Some of the fills might be good, and maybe they'll be better than a lot of them. But the groove doesn't sort of settle in for me until the 3rd or 4th take. And I know that I just know my tendencies. So as far as the MIDI thing, it didn't teach me anything about my playing, but recording definitely does. Anytime I record something, I already know what it's going to look like on a grid by how I, just by, what the grooves are and how difficult the music was or whatever.
I just had this thought. Is Jim using these drum patterns to demo new songs? Does he have your sample pack when he's
I don't
scratch
think
drumming?
no, he didn't have my sample pack. But by the way, if you want to check that out, if anybody does, it's a Platinum Samples. And there's actually, before I forget, when I did that whole session, that platinum sample, that groove session, after I got done, Rail said, "Hey, we just want a little promo video for you, and I said, well, this doesn't have anything to do with the grooves. He said, no, just kind of solo a little bit, play a little bit. And so that's on YouTube somewhere. It's you could just type in platinum samples in my name, and you can see me playing on this Yamaha electronic kit. And there's like fake fire behind me or something weird.
Of course, yeah, gotta have that.
Yeah, I didn't create it, but anyway, so that's out there. But what was the thing about Jim?
I was just asking if he was using your sample packs when he was demoing
No,
drums for new songs.
that would be actually good for me if people would, because, like as I mentioned, some guitar players who don't really know how to program, it would just give them. Uh, and I think they're useful tools for guitar players, or somebody writing a song, bass player, singer, whatever, to have those to use a sample pack rather than using a drum machine. It's happened so many times over these last years where a Oh, that gets into a different subject. I was going to talk about how guys program like a beat pattern or something, and then they play over it, like they create a song, and the beat pattern that they're playing doesn't even. It's not even like a real type of beat pattern a drummer would play, but yet they're using those to write songs over. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, are you talking about bands like Agoraphobic Nosebleed that are just all programmed drums and insanity?
I don't know those bands, but
Well,
probably so. That's probably what I'm talking about.
it could be. I admire some of that, but I think I know exactly what you're talking about too. I guess I always feel bad for drummers compared to guitarists. My guitar friends are always like, I got this new pedal, I got this new triple rectifier, I hot rodded my pickups. There's just endless amounts of guitar gear.
Right.
And when it comes to drum tech, I mean, I'm not a drummer by any means, but it seems that there's not a lot of new and exciting drum tech that's constantly on the horizon. So, in your career, has there been any drum tech that really stood out to you as, whoa, this is a game changer?
That's an interesting question. I mean, you're right about the fact that there hasn't been um, anything that it's not, yeah, the same as guitars. I guess because guitars are electronic and based mainly in the techno electronic world sort of thing. But with drums, it's wood, it's hoops, it's metal, it's wood, it's plastic heads. I mean, there's the rims mounts, which make the drums resonate more. I remember when that came out a few years back, where the drum kind of is isolated a little bit. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It has
Yeah.
like rubber grommets around the each of the lugs, and it lets the drum kind of resonate a little bit better. And so there's that. But I mean, there's always like, for instance, my company that I'm with, DW Drums, they're always experimenting with different types of woods and different type of veneers and how to cross, you know, uh, run all those sheets. Like when a drum is made, there's like maybe 7 different sheets of wood or whatever, and some of them they'll run horizontally, some they'll run vertically, some of them they'll run sideways. It's there's all that kind of weird stuff. When I was young, I don't want to say I was really I wasn't like this tech head or whatever, but I did kind of listen to that, and I was part of that little conversation where, ooh, do maple drums sound more resonant than birch drums, or do birch drums have that sharper edge? Should I get a birch kit? I used to be into that a little bit, but I stopped doing that years ago just because it seems so it's so stupid to sit around and talk about that kind of stuff forever. To me, I'm not like if I'll never ask somebody if I see somebody's drums or whatever, oh, are those wood drums, or I mean, are those maple or mahogany or whatever? I don't care at all. I mean, I really don't. I don't care anything about uh, any of that kind of stuff anymore. But I did, I guess, when I was younger. But as far as innovations and stuff like that, I mean, yeah, drums are wood and metal and plastic. Electronic drums are different, but drums are they're they're man-made items. You can make
Yeah,
if you have the tools at home, you can make a drum.
got to be one of the oldest instruments in existence.
Sure.
And the thing about electronic drums, once you start playing them, you've changed the genre of the music.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they don't, and it's weird because when electronic drums started coming out in '80s, like I remember that um, some companies, when they were like interviewed about it or whatever, some were saying this is going to replace acoustic drums at someday, and then some companies said no, we're not. That's not our. We're subscribing to. We're saying that this is an add-on, sort of to your drum kit. If you're to your acoustic drum kit, if you want to have these extra pieces, or if you have a certain gig that this works better on, or easier or whatever, but this does not replace acoustic drums. The thing about an acoustic drum is, and I know this from doing the sample sessions and all that kind of stuff, and I know it from what also happens on a lot of records I play is they'll sample I have my own home studio, but it's not like state of the art studio, and it's I get by and I get good sounds, but sometimes if I send my tracks out on a project or whatever, they'll take samples and add them to my snare drum or to my kick drum or whatever. But to me, if I listen to a session of mine that I've done and I listen to that snare drum as it runs through, each hit there, each hit can be pretty different. It really can be pretty different, the snare drum. And if you really like look at it and analyze if you listen to each snare drum like 10 times and you listen to the next one 10 times, they sound completely different and they're right in line with each other. But when you listen to the whole track, they sound the same or pretty much the same. They sound relative to each other. But if you really, really listen to it, but even when you listen to samples, as many, as the sample stuff that I've done, even saying this, I hear the snare drum sounding too much the same every single time. And that's the same as the electronic kits. Each hit sounds too much the same. There's so many nuances in a drum or in a drum, and especially a cymbal. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and that's why when I'm doing like the hi-hat thing, like I mentioned, this studio, the sample pack, doing the samples, that's why you have to do so many hi-hat hits, is because cymbals are weird, man. They're you can never, if you hit a cymbal and and somebody said hit that cymbal again and make it sound exactly the way you did, a hi-hat cymbal with the same openness, like you had it half open and then hit it again, exactly the same. It's nowhere going to be in the same ballpark. And you can hit it, you can do it 100 times, and there's still going to be some difference. Where a guitar, if you hit the note and you hit it again or whatever, probably about 5 or 10 different hits, and you'll probably get one that's pretty damn close to the last one. That's what I think, but I don't know. I'm not a guitar player, really. So
No, I think you're right. It's that organicness.
yeah, it's
Oh,
organic, totally.
you've woken up my organic dog here for a second. So
Mine are outside. My dogs are outside right now. They caught a squirrel
oh,
about
big day.
10 minutes before this interview started. So I'm looking out the window the whole time, making sure what they're doing with it. But yeah, my Labrador just caught a squirrel. So I would go out there and be with him, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose my Skype signal. So I've been sitting in the house here looking out the window the whole time. Beauty, where's your squirrel? She's got her paw on it. It looks like it's actually grabbing onto her paw, but it's been dead.
How much of it is left?
The whole squirrel. Yeah,
She's
but
just sort of
she just
mouthing it.
yeah, she's carrying it around the yard. I have 3 dogs, but yeah.
What are the
All
other
right.
dogs doing? They're just letting her have it?
Actually, when Beauty gets the squirrel, I have like a Lhasa Apso, and then I have sort of Pekingese mix, and I have a rat terrier, and the rat terrier is really small. And Beauty's about a year old, the Labrador, but she's the one, she's faster than the other one, so she'll catch it. But it's funny because she kind of, when she kills it, she kind of holds on to the middle of the stomach. And squirrel lovers aren't going to like this, what I'm talking about here. I hate squirrels. They eat all my pecans. Anyway, oh, she's going back outside with it now. And so she'll grab it by the middle instead of grabbing it, like in the areas that's going to give it damage. But GB, the rat terrier, will take the thing and just like wiggle its head back and forth and just like, like GB will take care, the rat terrier will take care of the squirrel, where Beauty kind of like, I don't say plays with it, but like, I don't know. It's just like, get rid of it. Come on, just do it.
Did you say pecans? Do you have a little orchard out there?
I have 13 pecan trees.
No kidding.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a huge plot of land. We have an acre. And so I have 13 pecan trees. And now is the time because, as you know, with Christmas time and Thanksgiving, pumpkin pie is a big thing. And I know you guys don't say pecan, you say pecan or something. So, yeah, the squirrels are out at this time and the pecans are falling. And so, yeah, we got tons of them.
Did you buy the property with the trees on it, or was this something you decided to do?
We bought this property 10 years ago, and that was the trees that we had. Some of them, they're kind of in a line in different points, and some of them had died over the years, and people hadn't replanted them, the previous people that were here. So I brought some desirables and Choctaws and planted those out there, and planted some walnuts. We got lime and lemon and orange and pear and apple. We got a bunch of different trees.
That's fantastic.
I
Do you have a
planted
little
all
farm
those.
stand or something, or is this just for fun?
No, just at home for me and my wife. And we planted everything else. Most of the pecan trees were here, but we planted everything else.
That sounds like an amazing place to be.
Yeah, awesome.
Anyway, so just one last thing for the fans, I guess. Fates
Mhm.
Warning related, sort of, just something that
Good.
I've thought about, which is in my experience, and you've been all over everywhere and seen everything, but in my experience, I feel like every scene has its equivalent of a hate breed, a dark throne, but not every scene has its equivalent of a Fates Warning. You can count on local people to put together grindcore bands and thrash bands and hardcore bands, but in my experience, there's not reliably going to be a bunch of power metal bands or a bunch of prog bands. And I'm not sure what sort of question I want to ask about that, other than, I'm trying to imagine somebody who today wants to be the next Fates Warning, and what on earth is it like to try to, get out there like that?
Oof. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question exactly. I mean, it is a vague question, but I mean, I think with a band like Fates Warning, um, starting out in the '80s, of course, I knew of the band from the first 3 records, most notably the second and third record. But I mean, the band obviously at that point was sort of Iron Maiden-ish, in ways, especially with John Arch's vocals.
Mm.
Um, but like, it's crazy when you think of a band like, Fates Warning, and to a larger degree, a band like Rush or Yes or any of those bands. I mean, it's a long process, to get to from starting, putting music together and growing with it, and growing as musicians as growing individually as musicians as well as a band. I mean, it takes years and years, and that's why, you know, the bands that have stuck together, and the bands like Fate's Warning or Dream Theater, Queensryche, or whoever, you know, like our sort of contemporaries in the style. It it just takes so many years of sticking together, even though the lineups have changed to a degree here and there every few years with the band member in and out. But somebody like Jim Matheos, who sort of stuck with it, you know, and stuck with the genre, and still created music that, I don't want to say it's similar, but he grew as a player and he kept working at it, and you know, better musicians along the way and that sort of thing, and better writing. I mean, it takes a long time to get to this, you know, to this level, or to this, you know, stage of a career. I don't think kids today have the patience for it at all. You know, I mean, it's uh, and I'm not saying, you know, they should, but it was a different world back then. You know, from the world that we have now, and uh, I was glad to be, you know, to come up in at the time that I did. You know, there was great music when I was coming up in the 70s, late 70s, with the hard rock, and then evolving into heavy metal in the early 80s. And then, you know, and the progressive music, and even, you know, death metal coming into being, and that sort of thing. So uh, just, you know, being a musician, and growing as a musician during this time, and with a band like Fate's Warning, or, you know, or Halford, or whoever I played with, in being part of those things. You know, it's amazing time for me as a musician, and I love the fact that the I grew up in a time where I had all those influences, and it's hard now for kids to succeed in music, because one, there's so much competition, and I mean, there's a lot more opportunity, but there's so much out there at the same time. You know, back then, when you mentioned like even Juggernaut, and recording that Juggernaut record, and we were fortunate to have a record. I mean, if you had a record deal in the 1980s, putting a record out in the late 80s, you were something. I mean, that was, you know, that was special. That's not something that everybody had. I mean, that was really, you know, really crazy to have an album out that you played on. Sure, a lot of them are in the you know, in the bargain bins, and went that way. But just to have those opportunities, to have a record out, to have an album out, you couldn't just. It's not like today, or you know, like even 20 years ago, where you could print up a CD, you know, on your own or whatever. You had to have a record label behind you to have an album out. And so, um, you know, I mean, growing up in the music business, you know, it's been cool for me, and I was fortunate to be a part of a lot of these cool bands, and to be a drummer during this time.
It's an absolutely remarkable career. You've touched on so much legendary territory with your playing.
Thanks.
I'm so glad that you were generous enough with your time, and you you neglected your dogs long enough to have this conversation.
I'll send you
Uh,
a picture. I'll send you a picture of Beauty if you want, with her squirrel.
yes, that is a picture of Beauty. Our listeners love dogs, so they're gonna wonder what's going on with the squirrel. So visual evidence would help.
All right.
Is there anything else we want to add before I let you go today?
No, it was a cool interview, Ian. So I appreciate it, man.
Right on. You have a good day, man.
All right, you too. Where do I send that picture?
Oh, how about you send it to why don't you just send it to my email,
I'll send it
me.com.
to you. I'll send you a
Awesome.
picture.
Yeah, I'd
Beauty
love
and the
it.
Squirrel. And I don't want no hate emails from squirrel lovers, because if you post it or something, or if somebody sees it,
Okay, so
no
I don't
hate
have to post it.
email.
If you don't want me to post it, I won't post it. It could just be
You can
between
post it
us.
if you want, but I'm just warning people. I don't want no hate email from squirrel lovers. It's a
All right.
squirrel, damn it.
Listeners, don't at Bobby over the squirrel.
All right.
I swear. All right, take it easy, Bobby.
You too.